This is the Media Police Post broadcasting from the Fort Hall School of Government. In this show, we police the state of truth in the Republic, and because truth is communicated to us by journalists and analysts, we have made it our civic duty at the Fort Hall School of Government to put it to the test. We advance from two confirmed truths about the media. One, and according to Roger Stone, the media is either lazy or evil, and for the most part, it is both evil and lazy. That is why the truth, their truth, must be put to a test. Two, that journalism is verified gossip. In fact, what is presented to us as news analysis is gossip that has been verified by journalists. This gossip has to be ground-truthed. We will assess the state of truth in what they submit to the Republic, and we will pass verdict on what is true and what is not. For the record, we are not journalists, we are thinkers. We are not lazy or evil, and we do not verify gossip. What we give you is the truth that sets you free. On today's show, we will discuss ideas that reflect unformed and uninformed opinions, and ideas that made you feel stupid. Narratives that fell into the cognitive trap of we see things as we are, not as they are. Narratives based on conjecture history and those that smack of envelope journalism. Welcome to the panel, CS and GK.
Asante. In the past week, the country was confronted anew by old wounds. Violence in Laikipia was an unfortunate reminder that there are tensions within the country that have been with us for decades, like a stubborn cancer which poses an existential threat, but with timely interventions, the tensions are a disease that can be conquered and cured.
Yeah.
It was an unfortunate reminder that there are those who exploit these tensions, commodifying them, usually through a currency of political violence. Predatory politicians unashamedly ravage the land in order to advance their networks of political patronage, portraying themselves as saviors and liberators to their core constituencies, but at the expense of other communities which end up paying with blood, dispossession, and devastation. And the timing of the violence will usually be around elections in order to use politics as a camouflage. And no one should be deceived that all this is not politically instigated and even tied to 2022. Ask yourself why most of the violence is focused in Laikipia West and which community lives there. If you look up a place called Olmoran, hundreds of families have been displaced and many people have also been killed. Presently, 150 families are being hosted by two churches, St. Mark Catholic Church and Deliverance Church at Olmoran Trading Center. Even though there have been a number of interventions by government, there are people who do not want the problem to be solved because they benefit from it. The Rift Valley Regional Commissioner, George Tembeya, is on record underlining that the ongoing violence in Laikipia is instigated by politicians and other powerful people in the community. There are a few politicians who deceive and instigate sections of their constituencies to rally against other communities and legitimate landowners, driving them out using force. At the end of the day, however, these few politicians end up taking the land for themselves. They basically exploit the genuine grievances of some sections of the people by blaming other ethnic communities. But the real agenda of these politicians is not to safeguard the interest of the communities. Their aim is to consolidate power and mint wealth at the price of innocent bloodshed and dispossession. Some of these issues were recently highlighted as early as July of this year, when Interior CS Fred Matiang'i went as far as penning an opinion piece in the Standard, highlighting what the real underlying issues are. Calling things as they are, he wrote that at the heart of the solution must be an honest and bold appreciation of the real underlying causes fueling the conflict. He stated that evidence gathered by security and intelligence agents points to an insidious agenda. That if you peer beneath the facade of drought-induced crisis, there emerges a picture of a sinister plot that is informed by politics of conquest, ethnic supremacy, clan chauvinism, and petty balkanization, motivated by individual political interests. He added that political practice is the greatest agent of criminal activities in Kenya. Leaders exploit the poor by using them as political collateral in supremacy conquests. What is also unfortunate about all that is happening in Laikipia is the fact that some of these issues are the cancer that the president and a few forward-thinking leaders have been trying to cure by bringing people together and boldly confronting perennial issues.
Absolutely.
As C.S. Matiang'i pointed out, no doubt, and as President Kenyatta has tried and continues to do, part of the solution lies in identifying and addressing the root cause of ethnic antagonism and ethnic tensions. And some of these issues were highlighted in the report by the BBI steering committee. The BBI was more than a document.
Yes, it was.
Issues such as fair and equitable resource allocation, issues such as having enough political administrative units and devolved units, which is part of what has happened in Laikipia West now. Issues such as bringing neighboring communities together to agree on mutually beneficial coexistence. And the CS has written about this history with his predecessors and the interventions that they tried to make. The president has also made efforts to get to the heart of the problems by also focusing on complex issues such as historical land injustices.
Yeah.
Which is why the president has been heavily invested in issuing of titles and making the land titling process efficient and transparent. In the last 8 years, Uhuru Kenyatta has issued over 5 million title deeds in 8 years, compared to a similar number in the first 50 years since independence.
Yep.
And he has restored the ownership of tens of millions of acres to hundreds of thousands of Kenyans. Meanwhile, while the president and other like-minded leaders are trying to solve these complex issues, his deputy will mockingly undermine these efforts by turning it into an issue of his cult of personality.
Mimi nataka niwaambie, kwa sababu nyinyi mumesema hiyo shamba iko na ni yangu. Sasa mimi nawapatia authority. Hiyo shamba eka 15,000 mnayosema ni yangu, endeni mugawanye mupatie wananchi.
Wow.
Powerful words to end with this, yes.
Wow. You know, CS, you touched on the church a little bit, and today I want to address the people of the church. I would like to address the events of the weekend that touched on the church and its relationship to politics. It all began when the head of the Anglican Church in Kenya, Mr. Archbishop Jackson Ole Sapit, called for the church to reclaim the pulpit. This move barred a strong delegation of politicians from addressing the public from the pulpit. Archbishop Ole Sapit said that the political leaders had violated the sacred nature of this so-called pulpit. These new rules have left me with some thoughts on the matter, and I hope you'll allow me to share them.
Of course.
First, what will this mean for Mr. Bwana Sifiwe? The deputy president has openly used the church as his core point of influence. It goes Gema, the church, and money. Those are his three. He has treated the congregation as political currency, openly offering resources in exchange for a platform to use the influence of the church to suit his agenda. He is presenting himself as the quote-unquote godly candidate. And so, don't you feel the moves by Raila and Mudavadi and all the rest to also address the church was their method to counter his influence? In a country that is more than 80% Christian, RUTO's showing of commitment to the church is an excellent campaign strategy. So how do you neutralize his influence? You do the exact same thing. He says, Bwana Asifiwe, you say, Asifiwe Bwana. Totally disarming his currency and trying to enlighten the public on his deception. After all, you cannot have monopoly over God. Which leads me to my second point. While I am a supporter of the church reclaiming the pulpit, I can't help but be a little cynical and ask why now, when RUTO has been doing this for months and after millions have been collected in tithes and charitable donations. Seems rather opportunistic in my opinion. In my view, it could be one of two things. On one hand, it could be that the church is trying to level the playing field by relinquishing its platform from all politicians. Or on the other hand, maybe they have made their decision and are shutting their eyes to other views that would put their leader of choice in a negative light. Which leads me to my final point. The church should make clear with regards to its stance on politics. We all know that the church is inherently political.
Yeah.
History teaches us as much. According to the Archbishop of Canterbury, the church gets involved in politics because, quote, because that's what Jesus did. Archbishop Ole Sapit made this move to make a big statement that he will not allow the church to be the background for politics come 2022. Yet the move to stop politicians from addressing the public is in itself a political move.
Yeah.
more clarity should be shared to the type of politics that they are rejecting. To sum it up, in recent past, the church has been considered to have picked sides, favoring the one that offers the most material contributions instead of the most faithful. And so I would like to remind believers to understand when they are being shepherded as different from when they are being used as a pawn in the game of politics.
It's interesting, GK. Your words have made me remember a number of key figures in the Kenyan church who stood up in times of politics. The late Bishop Cornelius Korea.
Yes.
You have Timothy Njoy. You have the late Cardinal Otunga. You have the late Bishop Muge.
Yes.
And Dingi Mwananzaki. There are quite a number, and sometimes it does require some of these key figures to be bold and to stand up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so GK, you've clearly spoken about the kind of legacy that the church wants to hold, because it seems to me that Archbishop Olesepit's views and understanding and kind of calling a message from the pulpit comes from a place of wanting to secure the church's legacy. So today I would like to, carry on this theme of legacy and respond to Wycliffe Muga's piece in The Star titled "Voters Are Ungrateful and Forgetful." I would like to thank Mr. Muga for answering a question I have long had about electoral politics. Why do voters always vote against the self-interest? Unbeknownst to me, the answer was rather obvious. Voters are ungrateful and forgetful. For Muga, this is one of the fundamental problems of electoral politics, and he has led me to ask a question. If indeed the ungrateful and forgetful voter is a mainstay of politics, how will this affect President Kenyatta? How will he be remembered, or perhaps more accurately, how will President Kenyatta be forgotten? The forgetfulness of the Kenyan voter is a part of the politics of memory. The politics of memory refers to the organization of collective memory. In essence, what a nation chooses to remember, what a nation doesn't choose to remember, and how a nation chooses to remember. Indeed, as James Carroll declares, memory is a political act.
Absolutely.
Therefore, for Muga, the amnesia that grips otherwise reliable and appreciative voters at the ballot box is inherently political in nature. It amounts to a rewriting of reality such that the achievements of the incumbent are rendered invisible and immaterial. For presidents, this problem is far worse, as often the fruits of their labor are not immediately apparent, and by the time they are, no one will care who planted the seeds. This is what happened to Kibaki. In his time, the massive socioeconomic advancements that launched the nation to recovery were forgotten. All people remembered was the corruption and the post-election violence. This is how Kibaki was forgotten. Does a similar fate await President Kenyatta, and is it permanent? Unfortunately, it may be too soon to answer both these questions, as the answer depends on who will succeed the president. But it is clear that the politics of a stubborn deputy may overshadow massive improvements in socioeconomic development. From health to devolution to roads and lands, President Kenyatta may be one of Kenya's most consequential leaders.
Absolutely.
However, to the forgetful and ungrateful Kenyan voter, he may as well have stood still for 8 years. Thank you for joining us on Media Police Post. See you next Monday.
Journalists, you've been put on notice.